The year was 1942, and the sleepy town of Willow Creek, nestled deep in the heartland of Michigan, hummed with a nervous energy that belied its tranquil facade. News from Europe painted a grim picture, and the war, once a distant rumble, now echoed closer with each passing day. For Sarah Jenkins, a woman forged from the same stubborn spirit as the land around her, this energy was a constant, irritating static. She wasn't built for idleness, and the endless discussions about rationing and victory gardens, while important, felt like a cage to her boundless ambition. Sarah was, by all accounts, an anomaly in Willow Creek, tall, with a stride that spoke of purpose and hands that knew the honest grit of a wrench as well as a needle. She defied the gentle expectations placed upon women of her era. Before the war, she'd worked alongside her father in his garage, a natural with engines, her mechanical aptitude a quiet marvel. But now, with her father off serving in the Pacific, those skills were seen by many as inconvenient. She'd joined the local auxiliary defense effort, hoping to put her knowledge to good use. Instead, she found herself assigned to the endless, mind-numbing task of sorting scrap metal for recycling. The men, mostly older fellows deemed unfit for direct combat, would eye her with a mixture of amusement and thinly veiled disapproval. "Just stick to the paperwork, dear," old Mr. Henderson, a man whose hands trembled more than they sorted, would often wheeze, a patronizing smile creasing his weathered face. "Let the boys handle the heavy lifting." Sarah would bite her tongue, her jaw tight. Her uniform, crisp and neat, felt like a costume for a part she wasn't allowed to play. She knew she was capable of more. She'd spent countless evenings poring over her father's old engineering books, diagrams of radial engines and hydraulic systems etched into her mind. She could spot a worn gear or a faulty connection from 20 paces. But her expertise, her passion, was dismissed with a wave of a hand and a dismissive chuckle. The deepest cuts came not from outright malice, but from the subtle slights, the whispered comments she wasn't meant to hear but always did. "A woman's place is in the home," she overheard Mrs. Gable, the mayor's wife, declare one afternoon during a Red Cross meeting. "Especially in times like these, to keep the hearth warm for our boys." Sarah, who was at that very moment expertly repairing a sputtering generator that had threatened to shut down the entire meeting, felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Her contribution, her sweat, her skill rendered invisible by antiquated notions. Her solace came in the evenings, in the quiet solitude of her small, neat house. She'd listen to the crackling radio, news reports of bomber raids and desperate battles filling the air, and a fierce determination would ignite within her. She knew deep in her bones that she had a role to play, a way to contribute beyond sorting bolts and mending socks. She just needed a chance. One blustery October afternoon, a new face arrived at the auxiliary base. Major Thomas Sterling, a lean man with a stern gaze and a reputation for efficiency, was sent from Washington to oversee the retooling of local industries for the war effort. He was a man of few words, and those he did speak were clipped and direct. Sarah, along with the other volunteers, watched him with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Major Sterling spent his first few days observing, his eyes missing nothing. He walked through the scrapyard, past the bustling kitchens, and even lingered by the office where Sarah diligently sorted her mountains of metal. She felt his gaze, a prickle on the back of her neck, but tried to ignore it, focusing on her task. She refused to give him any reason to confirm the prevailing opinions about her. Then, on the third day, a crucial piece of machinery, an old but vital lathe used for shaping metal parts, seized up. A cloud of thick, acrid smoke billowed from its motor, and the men, usually so confident, stood around scratching their heads, offering useless suggestions. Mr. Henderson, ever the loudest, declared it beyond repair, a casualty of wartime overuse. Major Sterling, who had been observing from a distance, approached the disabled machine. He examined it with a practiced eye, then turned to the assembled group. "Anyone here know anything about these?" he asked, his voice low but cutting through the chatter. Silence. The men shuffled their feet, avoiding his gaze. Then Sarah, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, stepped forward. "I do, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My father had one just like it. I've helped him fix it many times." A wave of snickers rippled through the men. Mr. Henderson actually snorted. "Now, Sarah, this isn't about patching up a bicycle chain," he scoffed. Major Sterling, however, ignored the derision. He looked at Sarah, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Show me," he said simply. Sarah, feeling the weight of every skeptical gaze, knelt beside the oily behemoth. She systematically checked the wiring, traced the belts, and finally, with a confident twist of a screwdriver, opened the motor housing. Inside, a tangled mess of burnt wires and a cracked rotor lay exposed. It was a bigger job than she'd initially thought, but not impossible. For the next 2 hours, under the watchful, silent gaze of Major Sterling and the increasingly stunned expressions of the men, Sarah worked. Her hands, usually so nimble with a needle, moved with a different kind of grace, precise and sure. She salvaged what she could, jury-rigged a temporary connection, and even fashioned a makeshift part from a piece of scrap that no one else had considered useful. Finally, with a grunt of effort, she stood up, wiped her hands on a rag, and nodded towards the major. "Try it now, sir." Major Sterling, without a word, flipped the switch. With a cough and a sputter, the lathe whirred to life, its once ailing motor now humming a steady tune. The men stared, their mouths agape, the snickers replaced by a stunned silence. He turned to Sarah, his expression still unreadable. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked. "My father, sir," she replied, a quiet pride in her voice. "And from reading his books." Major Sterling nodded slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Impressive, Miss Jenkins," he said. "Very impressive." He then turned to the assembled men, his voice now a crisp command. "From now on, Miss Jenkins will be assigned to mechanical maintenance, and I expect every one of you to treat her with the respect her skills demand. Understood?" The men, chastened, mumbled their assent. Sarah felt a surge of triumph, a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was a start. A tiny crack in the wall of prejudice, opened by the unwavering strength of her own resolve. As the hum of the lathe filled the workshop, a new chapter, she knew, had just begun for Sarah Jenkins in Willow Creek. The whispers might continue, but now they would have to contend with the undeniable roar of her capability. The quiet victory at the auxiliary base was a small but significant turning point for Sarah. The men, though still occasionally prone to their ingrained biases, now approached her with a hesitant deference when a machine sputtered or a pump failed. Major Sterling, true to his word, had quietly shifted her duties, allowing her to spend more time with the machinery that she understood so intimately. The scrap metal, once a symbol of her sidelined potential, now felt like a resource, a challenge to transform into something useful. But Willow Creek, for all its charm, felt increasingly small. The war effort was escalating, and the newspapers were filled with stories of factories across the nation converting to produce everything from jeeps to munitions. Sarah devoured these articles, her imagination alight with the scale of the undertaking. She read about vast new plants, arsenals of democracy, as President Roosevelt called them, rising from farmland, churning out war material at an unprecedented rate. One particular story caught her eye, a small piece tucked away in the back of the Detroit Free Press. It spoke of Henry Ford's ambitious plan to build B-24 Liberator bombers on an assembly line, a feat many deemed impossible. The article mentioned a place called Willow Run, a colossal new factory under construction near Ypsilanti, Michigan. The sheer audacity of the idea, the challenge of building such a complex machine with assembly line efficiency, resonated deeply with Sarah. It was a mechanical puzzle on a grand scale, a testament to American ingenuity. She found herself drawn to the idea of Willow Run, a feeling growing within her that this was where she belonged. It was a place where skill, not gender, would surely be the measure of a person. She imagined the roar of the machinery, the smell of grease and metal, the collective purpose of thousands working towards a single, vital goal. It was a stark contrast to the polite, constrained atmosphere of Willow Creek. One crisp November morning, Major Sterling called her into his makeshift office. He sat behind a desk cluttered with maps and reports, a telegraph form clutched in his hand. "Miss Jenkins," he began, his voice devoid of its usual formality, a hint of something uncharacteristic in his tone. "I've received a request from Willow Run." Sarah's heart leaped. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but a spark of hope surely danced in her eyes. "They're looking for skilled mechanics," he continued, observing her closely. "Specifically, individuals with a strong understanding of complex hydraulic and pneumatic systems and a knack for problem-solving under pressure. Someone who can think on their feet and isn't afraid of a challenge." He paused, then leaned forward. "They also mentioned a need for individuals who can lead small teams, people with an innate ability to inspire confidence and troubleshoot on the fly. It's a monumental undertaking, Miss Jenkins. They're attempting to do something that's never been done before, to produce a bomber every hour." Sarah listened, her breath held tight in her chest. Every word was a confirmation of her secret yearning. This was it, her chance. "The work will be demanding," Major Sterling warned, his gaze steady. "Long hours, immense pressure, and it's not just about turning wrenches. It's about being part of a machine, a human machine working in perfect synchronicity. It will also mean relocating, leaving Willow Creek behind." "Sir," Sarah finally spoke, her voice firm, unwavering. "I'm ready. I want to go to Willow Run." Major Sterling studied her for a long moment, a ghost of that rare smile touching his lips again. "I thought you might," he said, then pushed the telegraph form across the desk. "This is a recommendation. It highlights your work here, particularly with that old lathe. It also mentions your initiative and mechanical aptitude. It's not a guarantee, mind you, but it's a strong endorsement." He looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "Willow Creek will miss your capabilities, Miss Jenkins, but I believe you are destined for something greater than sorting scrap metal. Go to Willow Run. Show them what you can do." The next few days were a whirlwind. Sarah packed her meager belongings, the familiar sights of Willow Creek taking on a new significance as she prepared to leave them behind. Her neighbors, the same. Ones who had once whispered about her unconventional ways now offered hesitant goodbyes and wishes of good luck. Even Mr. Henderson, with a gruff nod, admitted, "We'll be lost without you, and that knack for fixing things, Sarah." It was a small concession, but a concession nonetheless. The journey to Willow Run was a long and reflective one. She rode, a bus packed with other hopeful workers, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. As the bus lumbered closer to Ypsilanti, the landscape began to change. The gentle farmlands gave way to industrial complexes, the air grew thicker with the smell of exhaust and manufacturing, and the sky seemed to hum with an electric anticipation. Then she saw it. In the distance, a colossal structure stretching almost a mile long, a veritable city of steel and glass, rose from the flat Michigan plain. Willow Run. It was even more immense than the articles had described, a testament to human ambition and wartime necessity. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking, almost intimidating. When she finally arrived at the factory gates, she was just one face in a sea of thousands, all converging on this monumental undertaking. Men and women, young and old, from every corner of the country, all drawn by the call to contribute. The air crackled with a palpable energy, a sense of collective purpose that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She made her way through the bustling administrative offices, her recommendation letter clutched in her hand. The process was efficient, almost militaristic. She was interviewed by a stern-faced woman who seemed to gauge not just her skills, but her resolve. Sarah spoke with passion about her experience, her knowledge of engines, and her unwavering desire to serve. A few days later, she received her assignment. She was placed in the hydraulics department, a critical section responsible for the intricate systems that controlled the bomber's landing gear, bomb bay doors, and control surfaces. It was a challenging role, requiring meticulous attention to detail and a deep understanding of fluid dynamics. She was one of only a handful of women in her immediate team, and the initial stares and hushed comments were a familiar echo of Willow Creek. But this time, Sarah was ready. She had Major Sterling's endorsement, her own proven skills, and a burning desire to prove herself on this grand stage. She arrived for her first shift, her uniform crisp, her tools gleaming, her mind sharp. As the colossal factory roared to life around her, the rhythmic clang of metal and the hiss of steam, a constant symphony, Sarah Jenkins, the underestimated woman from Willow Creek, felt a powerful sense of belonging. The war might be raging across oceans, but here, in the heart of Michigan, she was finally in the thick of the fight, ready to build the wings of victory. The whispers of doubt would be drowned out by the thunder of ambition and the relentless pursuit of an impossible goal. Life at Willow Run was a relentless, exhilarating blur. The factory was a microcosm of America at war, a melting pot of backgrounds and experiences, all united by a singular, urgent mission to build B-24 Liberators. The noise was constant, the clang of metal, the whirring of drills, the shouts of foremen, the rhythmic thump of machinery. It was a symphony of production, a testament to the raw power of human effort. Sarah thrived in this environment. The complexity of the B-24's hydraulic systems, with their labyrinthine network of pipes, valves, and actuators, was a constant intellectual challenge. She spent her days on the assembly line, often perched precariously on scaffolding, meticulously inspecting connections, bleeding lines, and calibrating pressures. Each bomber had over a mile of hydraulic tubing, and a single flaw could mean disaster. The stakes were incredibly high. Initially, the skepticism from some of her male colleagues was palpable. She overheard the familiar refrains. "What does a woman know about hydraulics?" Or, "She'll just slow us down." But Willow Run was a place that valued speed and efficiency above all else. There was no time for polite prejudices when the enemy was bombing cities and sinking ships. Sarah didn't engage in arguments. She simply worked. She absorbed information like a sponge, asked intelligent questions, and, most importantly, solved problems. When a new batch of hydraulic pumps arrived with a subtle manufacturing defect that baffled the usual troubleshooters, it was Sarah who, after hours of poring over schematics and conducting careful tests, pinpointed the issue. Her solution, a minor adjustment to a specific valve, saved countless hours of rework and potential failures. Word of her competence spread quickly. Foremen, initially hesitant, began to seek her out for advice on particularly stubborn issues. The Riveters, the women who had flocked to Willow Run from farms and towns across the country, looked to her with a mixture of admiration and camaraderie. They were all in this together, breaking down barriers with every rivet driven, every wire connected, every system perfected. One day, a major setback occurred. A shipment of critical landing gear components was delayed, threatening to grind a section of the assembly line to a halt. Panic rippled through the department. Halting the line, even for a few hours, meant falling behind schedule. A direct blow to the factory's ambitious goal of producing a bomber every 63 minutes. The lead foreman, a grizzled veteran named Frank, was beside himself. "We're dead in the water," he roared, pacing frantically. "Without those parts, we can't move a single fuselage forward." Sarah, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting through the rising anxiety, "what if we could adapt some of the older model landing gear, the ones from the B-24Ds that are being refurbished for training? They're not exactly the same, but the core hydraulic connections are similar. It would require some extensive modifications, but it might buy us enough time until the new shipment arrives." Frank stared at her, then at the older parts stored in a dusty corner. "Adapt them? That's a monumental task, Miss Jenkins. It would mean redesigning half the system on the fly. And who would even know how to do that? I do, sir, Sarah replied, her gaze steady. I've studied those older schematics, and I believe with a small team we could implement the necessary changes. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would keep the line moving. Frank, desperate, looked around at his other mechanics, their faces etched with uncertainty. No one else had a viable solution. He sighed, then nodded. All right, Jenkins. You've got your team. Make it happen. And if you fail... He left the unspoken threat hanging in the air. Sarah assembled her team. A quiet, meticulous older woman named Agnes who had an uncanny ability to spot minute defects, and a strong young man named Charlie, fresh off a farm, whose brute strength was matched only by his eagerness to learn. For the next 36 hours, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unwavering determination, they worked nonstop. Sarah became the architect of the solution. She sketched modifications on grease-stained blueprints, directed Agnes in the precise adjustments to be made, and guided Charlie in the careful rerouting of hydraulic lines. The work was painstaking, requiring not just mechanical skill but an almost artistic eye for improvisation. She faced moments of doubt when a connection wouldn't quite fit or a pressure reading was off, but she pushed through, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and possibilities. Finally, as dawn broke over the sprawling factory, casting long shadows across the assembly line, the first adapted landing gear was installed. With bated breath, they watched as the test hydraulics engaged. The massive wheels descended smoothly, locked into place, and then retracted with a satisfying hiss. It worked. A collective cheer erupted from the assembled workers, a wave of relief washing over the department. Frank, his face streaked with grease and fatigue, clapped Sarah on the shoulder, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "Jenkins," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you saved us. You truly saved us." From that day forward, Sarah's standing at Willow Run was cemented. She was no longer just Miss Jenkins or one of the women. She was Sarah, the hydraulic expert, the problem solver, the one who could adapt and overcome. The whispers of doubt transformed into murmurs of respect. The rhythm of the factory continued, relentless and unforgiving. The German spies operating in the shadows were indeed stunned. Their intelligence reports, meticulously gathered from various sources, had painted a picture of American industrial capacity that was formidable, but not this formidable. They had scoffed at the initial claims of a bomber every hour, dismissing it as wartime propaganda. But their operatives, feeding them information from across the Atlantic, spoke of an ever-increasing stream of liberators pouring out of Michigan, flying across the ocean to bomb German targets. They couldn't comprehend the scale, the speed, the sheer audacity of it all. They particularly struggled to understand the human element of this miracle. Their reports detailed the thousands of women, many of whom had never worked in a factory before, who were now skilled mechanics, riveters, and welders. They couldn't fathom how a nation could so quickly transform its workforce, how ordinary citizens could achieve such extraordinary feats of production. Sarah, oblivious to the intelligence reports across the ocean, continued her work. She trained new recruits, both men and women, sharing her knowledge with patience and clarity. She led her team with a quiet authority, her strength now recognized. Her sacrifices for the war effort acknowledged in the hum of every perfectly functioning hydraulic system. The injustice she had felt in Willow Creek, the mocking and underestimation, now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the deep satisfaction of knowing her contributions were vital. Every successful bomber that rolled off the line, every completed hydraulic system, was a testament not just to American industry, but to her own unwavering spirit. She was a crucial cog in the assembly line of miracles, building the wings that would carry hope across the world. And as the factory roared around her, she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be, proving every doubter wrong, one perfectly assembled part at a time. The relentless pace at Willow Run was a source of immense pride, but it also created an environment ripe for unseen threats. The pressure to maintain the 63-minute bomber schedule was immense, and while the factory hummed with patriotic fervor, it also harbored shadows. German intelligence, as Sarah and her colleagues were unknowingly demonstrating, was indeed stunned by the sheer output. But bewilderment quickly turned to desperation, and desperation led to insidious tactics. Whispers of sabotage began to circulate like a cold draft through the massive plant. A wrench left carelessly in a fuselage, a batch of rivets found to be substandard, a small but critical fire in a remote storage area, isolated incidents at first, dismissed as accidents or fatigue-induced errors. But as these occurrences became more frequent, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Sarah, now a respected leader in the hydraulics department, was acutely aware of the heightened tension. Her meticulous nature, once a source of gentle amusement, became an invaluable asset. She noticed details others missed, inconsistencies in materials, subtle shifts in team dynamics. She felt a prickle of unease, a gut feeling that something was deeply wrong beneath the surface of efficient production. Her team, a small but dedicated group, worked tirelessly. Agnes, with her sharp eyes, noticed an unusual batch of hydraulic fluid that seemed slightly off-color. Charlie, despite his strength, reported that some bolts felt strangely loose, even after being torqued to specification. Sarah cataloged these observations, a silent alarm growing louder in her mind. One sweltering afternoon, a newly assembled B-24 just off the final assembly line was undergoing its initial ground tests. Sarah was on site, overseeing the hydraulic checks. Suddenly, with a sickening lurch, the landing gear failed to retract. The massive bomber sagged, its wings scraping the concrete with a horrifying shriek of tortured metal. Panic erupted. The test pilots scrambled out, cursing. Foremen rushed to assess the damage. The entire production line for a terrifying moment seemed to hold its breath. A landing gear failure, especially on a newly completed aircraft, was an unthinkable catastrophe. Sarah, her heart pounding, immediately began her inspection. The failure was catastrophic. The main hydraulic line, a robust steel pipe designed to withstand immense pressure, had completely ruptured, seemingly from the inside. But the break was peculiar, almost too clean, like a deliberate cut rather than a burst from internal pressure. As she examined the damaged line, a cold dread washed over her. She recognized a tiny, almost invisible scratch near the point of rupture, a mark inconsistent with normal wear and tear. It was precise, deliberate. This wasn't an accident. She immediately reported her findings to Frank, the lead foreman, her voice tight with urgency. Frank, usually gruff and dismissive, listened intently as Sarah explained her suspicions. The damage, she argued, wasn't consistent with a stress fracture. It looked disturbingly like a small, precisely placed incision, designed to weaken the line and cause a catastrophic failure under pressure. Frank, a man who believed in hard facts, was initially skeptical. "Sabotage, Jenkins? Are you sure? That's a serious accusation." "I am, sir," Sarah insisted, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't an accident, and it's not the first unusual thing we've seen. The faulty rivets, the off-color hydraulic fluid. These aren't isolated incidents. Someone is trying to cripple us." Her conviction, coupled with her proven track record, swayed Frank. He escalated her concerns to factory security and, ultimately, to Major Sterling, who had maintained a presence at Willow Run, overseeing the broader logistical challenges. Major Sterling arrived on the scene, his face grim. He listened to Sarah's detailed explanation, examined the damaged hydraulic line himself, and then ordered a full investigation. The atmosphere in the factory shifted overnight. Trust once implicit became fragile. Workers eyed each other with suspicion. Security guards, usually a background presence, became highly visible, their scrutiny intense. The investigation uncovered more unsettling evidence. Small, perfectly formed metal shards, almost microscopic, were found embedded in the filters of other hydraulic systems. These shards, when analyzed, were not consistent with any material used in the B-24's construction. They were foreign, insidious, designed to slowly abrade internal components and cause eventual failure. Someone was systematically introducing these contaminants. The realization sent a chill through the factory. German spies, operating within their very walls. The notion was terrifying. The goal wasn't just to slow production, but to send bombers into the sky with built-in flaws to put American pilots in harm's way. The pressure mounted. The FBI was called in, their agents moving discreetly through the plant, observing, questioning. But finding the culprit in a factory of over 40,000 workers was like finding a needle in a haystack. Sarah, however, felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was a battle, not just of production, but of wits. She began to observe her colleagues with a different eye, not with suspicion, but with a keen sense of anomaly. She paid attention to habits, to schedules, to those who seemed to disappear at odd times or showed unusual interest in certain parts of the hydraulic system. She remembered a new worker, a quiet, unassuming man named Hans, who had joined her team a few weeks prior. He was exceptionally skilled, almost too skilled, she now realized, and he had an uncanny knack for being near the sites of the accidents. He also had an unusually strong accent, which he explained away as coming from a small, isolated German-American community in Pennsylvania. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but now, every detail seemed suspicious. One evening, working late on a particularly complex section of the line, Sarah saw Hans lingering near a fresh shipment of hydraulic lines, ostensibly checking inventory. But as he thought no one was watching, she saw him subtly reach into his pocket, pull out a tiny vial, and, with a swift, almost imperceptible flick of his wrist, sprinkle something into one of the open pipes. Her blood ran cold. She knew with absolute certainty what she had just witnessed. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was truth. The sheer audacity of it, the cold calculation, filled her with a righteous fury. This man, a wolf in sheep's clothing, was actively endangering the lives of American servicemen, undermining the colossal effort of everyone around her. She didn't confront him. She knew that would be dangerous, potentially jeopardizing the entire investigation. Instead, she quietly backed away, her heart hammering, her mind racing. She had to act, and she had to be smart. The truth, she knew, would lead to justice, but she needed irrefutable proof. The shadows had revealed their hand, and now it was her turn to expose them to the unforgiving light. The weight of what she had witnessed pressed heavily on Sarah. Hans, the quiet, seemingly meticulous mechanic, was a saboteur, a German spy lurking within the heart of America's war machine. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but it also solidified her resolve. She wasn't just fixing machines anymore. She was fighting a silent war on the assembly line. She spent the next few days observing Hans with a hawk's eye, making sure her scrutiny went unnoticed. She documented his movements, the times he lingered near critical components, the subtle glances he cast around when he thought no one was looking. She noticed how he always seemed to be alone when the accidents occurred, how he offered plausible, almost too perfect explanations for any anomalies she pointed out. Sarah knew she couldn't just accuse him. Without concrete proof, it would be her word against his, and the factory, already on edge, couldn't afford false alarms. She needed to catch him in the act or find physical evidence that would unequivocally link him to the sabotage. She confided in Major Sterling, explaining what she had seen. He listened gravely, his expression tightening with each detail. "This is extremely dangerous, Miss Jenkins," he warned. "If he suspects you, your life could be at risk." "I understand, sir," she replied, her voice firm. "But I cannot stand by while he puts our pilots in harm's way. We need to catch him, and we need to do it quickly." Major Sterling, recognizing her unwavering courage, agreed to set a trap. They would monitor Hans closely, but Sarah would be the primary observer, given her intimate knowledge of the hydraulics department and her ability to blend in. The plan was risky, requiring precise timing and absolute secrecy. The opportunity came a few nights later. Hans had a late shift, ostensibly to perform routine maintenance on a critical section of the assembly line where completed hydraulic systems were awaiting final installation. Sarah, under the guise of conducting an urgent inventory check, arranged to be in the same area. The factory was quieter at night, the roar of the day subdued to a steady hum. Shadows danced among the massive fuselages, creating an eerie, almost conspiratorial atmosphere. Sarah moved stealthily, her heart thumping against her ribs, every sense alert. She watched as Hans, believing himself alone, began his work. He moved with a practiced ease, his hands deftly checking connections. Then, just as Sarah had suspected, he paused. He glanced around, his eyes sweeping the vast emptiness of the factory floor. Satisfied he was unobserved, he reached into a hidden pocket in his overalls. This time it wasn't a vial of shards. It was a tiny, specialized tool, a precision cutter designed to make a hairline incision in metal tubing that would be almost impossible to detect with the naked eye. He knelt beside a freshly installed hydraulic line, his movements swift and silent, and began to work. Sarah, her breath held, knew this was her moment. She quickly but silently fumbled in her pocket for the small, discreet camera Major Sterling had given her, a new experimental device meant for intelligence gathering. She raised it, steadied her hands, and with a silent click, captured Hans in the act. The flash was almost imperceptible, a tiny flicker in the dimly lit factory, but it was enough. Hans, startled by the faint light, whipped his head around. His eyes, now devoid of their previous quiet demeanor, met Sarah's. For a terrifying moment, a primal fear gripped her. His face contorted, a mask of cold fury replacing his calm facade. He lunged. Sarah, fueled by adrenaline and a lifetime of fighting for respect, reacted instantly. She sidestepped his rush, grabbing a heavy wrench from a nearby workbench. As he stumbled past her, she swung, not with the intent to harm, but to incapacitate. The wrench connected with his arm with a dull thud. He cried out, dropping his specialized tool. Before he could recover, Major Sterling and a team of FBI agents, who had been waiting in the wings based on Sarah's signal, burst from the shadows. Hans was quickly subdued, his struggle brief and desperate. The tiny cutting tool, along with the photographic evidence, was secured. The revelation of a German spy in their midst sent shockwaves through Willow Run, but it also brought a profound sense of relief. The elusive threat, the insidious sabotage, finally had a face. In the aftermath, Sarah was hailed as a hero. She stood before the entire factory assembly, not in her grease-stained overalls, but in a freshly pressed uniform, looking out at the sea of faces, the Rosies, the mechanics, the foremen. Major Sterling, his voice filled with pride, presented her with a commendation for her courage and keen detective work. "Miss Jenkins," he announced, his voice ringing through the cavernous factory. Through her bravery and exceptional observation, not only exposed a dangerous enemy agent, but also prevented countless potential failures that could have cost American lives. She exemplifies the spirit of Willow Run, and indeed, the spirit of America. A deafening cheer erupted, a roar of genuine respect and gratitude that made the metal girders of the factory vibrate. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her, a powerful sense of vindication. The whispers of Willow Creek, the patronizing smiles, the casual dismissals, all were drowned out by this thunderous applause. She had not only earned respect, but she had saved lives. The justice was swift. Hans, under interrogation, quickly confessed, revealing a wider network of German intelligence operatives attempting to undermine American war production. His exposure led to the arrest of several other spies across different war factories, a vital blow to the enemy's efforts. Sarah, however, found her true redemption not in the accolades, but in the unwavering purpose of her work. She continued at Willow Run, now with an even greater sense of commitment. She trained new recruits, sharing her expertise not just in mechanics, but in vigilance. She became a symbol of quiet strength, a testament to the idea that skill and courage knew no gender. The factory hummed on, its output reaching unprecedented levels. The goal of a bomber every 63 minutes was not just met, but often surpassed. German intelligence, truly stunned, revised their reports, acknowledging the impossible scale of American industrial power, and lamenting the unexpected resilience of its workforce, particularly the women who had stepped up to the challenge. Sarah Jenkins, the once underestimated woman from a small town, had found her voice, her power, and her purpose on the grand stage of Willow Run. Every bomber that soared into the sky, carrying hope and defiance across the ocean, carried a piece of her unwavering spirit. She was a silent guardian of the arsenal of democracy, a testament to the extraordinary strength that emerges when ordinary people rise to meet extraordinary times, ensuring that justice, like the roar of a liberator, would always prevail.